above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
Fault Lines.
And we're back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan and Franco. We are joined by Bruno Franco, independent political analyst, commentator, and host of Frank Analysis and HMO podcast. That's the Hear Me Out podcast. By the way, you can follow Franco on Twitter. Check him out at B43Franco. That's the letter B, the numbers 4 and 3, Franco. And you can also check him out on YouTube at Frank Analysis and HMO podcast. That's Hear Me Out podcast. Bruno, thank you for joining us this morning. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me on. I've been listening to you guys for a while. I've been subscribed to Jamal Thomas's channel since like 2018, so it's a great honor to be here. It's unbelievable.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's very cool to have you. All right, let's get right into it. You have a channel. I was watching one of your videos the other day. I was watching a good long overview of Avril Haines, and specifically you were going into Event 201, which I think gets misreported on a lot, but it's interesting to look at as an early sort of preparatory event for a pandemic like this. And some of the stuff that the people who are who were taking place in that event, who were on the panel that was acting out the scenario that was described in Event 201, including Avril Haines, started to say some stuff that sounds a little bit spooky. And we've seen some of that come to pass. Now, some people have called this sort of preparation for the pandemic, not just in terms of preparing for a possible pandemic, but some people were getting pretty conspiratorial about it and saying that they were planning this thing out. I'm not going to get into that territory, but I think as people are reporting on it, if people are saying that, part of what gets left out is some of the stuff that people were saying that has indeed come to pass. And again, Avril Haines, Biden's pick for Director of National Intelligence. I thought you did a great overview of some of her background, her connections, and some of the weirder stuff that she was saying during that event. Can you just go into that for a minute? Can you just set us up? What was Event 201 from your perspective? And who is Avril Haines? Yeah. What's her background? Yeah, sure. And what are you concerned about there, Bruno?
Yeah, first I just want to mention I'm not here to push any narrative. Like, I'm not here to say that this is like a bioweapon. I'm not here to say that this was like that they were planning this out. I'm just here to say that a lot of the stuff that was said there has come to pass. Like, we're seeing it happen now. So whether they had something like this planned out, like manufacturing people's consent, like censoring certain information that they don't want the public to know, they've had stuff like this planned out for a long time. So for people who don't know what Event 201 is, it's a exercise that was hosted by the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, and it was in partnership with the World Economic Forum, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Johnson & Johnson, and there were many high-ranking officials of the WHO, the CDC, people like George Gao, who's a virologist and director of the Chinese CDC. And it was supposed to be an exercise of how prepared we are for a pandemic. Now, the event was held in 2019, October 2019, a year ago, before the actual pandemic hit. And in it, they talked about how they were going to have the government and social media companies work together to block misinformation and take down channels. So a lot, like we're seeing them take down channels that are challenging the mainstream narrative about COVID. Like, they took down the Last American Vagabonds channel. They took down the Conscious Resistance with Derek Bros. And for other channels that even talk about like COVID or the vaccine, they have to put like underneath the video like a link to the CDC or a link to Wikipedia. Even when you talk about the election, they also put like a link to like AP, and that's some of the stuff that they talked about in this event. Like they had to work with some telecommunications companies or companies that people trust. Information that quote unquote they want people to know. They didn't say like what objective information that they want people to know. They said the information that they want people to know. And I think that's something that people need to be looking into. And Avril Haines, she already has a history of trying to cover up some of the shady stuff that the US has done. So I'm quoting here from Business Insider, from an article called Biden Picks a Spy Chief Who Played a Role in the Obama Drone War Program, which says that some progressives and critics have accused Haines of complicity in the CIA's use of torture or enhanced interrogation techniques after 9/11. She recommended Gina Haspel for CIA director, though Haspel has been implicated in the agency's use of torture.
Bloody Gina Haspel. Bloody Gina.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, torture, and then hid the tapes. She got caught destroying the tapes on torture. But please keep going.
Yeah. So it goes on to say that Haines is also remembered for redacting the Senate Intelligence Committee's report on the use of torture and for approving a panel that ultimately decided not to reprimand the CIA personnel who spied on the committee's investigators. So again, like she has a history to hide or suppress information from the public. So we should be questioning why they're trying so hard to hide information about.
You know, I think the sad truth is that on issues of national defense, these guys basically agree. And I think that's the sad truth. I mean, to be honest, Democrats have seemed far more hawkish than Republicans on a lot of this stuff. I mean, and it didn't used to always be that way. Republicans used to castigate Democrats as weak, et cetera, in which case these guys would get reflexive and pushing back. But I don't think this is reflexive anymore. Obama was a hawk. Clinton would have been a hawk, and Joe Biden will be a hawk. And I think that's unfortunate, especially when you're getting into like the intelligence services and everything else. Look, whatever you want to think of Trump, and clearly I don't think much of Trump. He didn't start any new wars. He could have sleepwalked into one, yes, but he didn't start any new ones. Frank, from the standpoint of Avril, you said she gave a testimony, or she gave basically a recommendation that they not, or that they hide the information based on the torture reports.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I remember, and by the way, you said also the spying on Congress. Now, this was Brennan, correct?
At the time, I don't know if I think she was there during the when Pompeo and the torturing took place under the George Bush administration. So she was there during the transition from the Bush to Obama administration. Like, I'm not.
Okay, we're having a little bit of difficulty with the thing. It seems like I think you're blinking out on us. So let's see if we can.
One quick thing here is, one quick thing here is, we're going to try calling you back, Bruno. In case you're listening to us right now, you keep blinking out. We keep losing connection with you, losing some reception here. I see we called you on your phone. There's a chance. I think Andre will work with you to try to see if we can get you on. 'Cause it's a fascinating conversation, interesting topic. And I mean, a couple other things we haven't mentioned here. For one thing, Avril Haines was a consultant with Palantir. She was an advisor to them. She says that she was advising them on like diversity issues, like the quota of women that they were bringing in or something like this, becoming a more diverse organization. But just the fact that she was consulting with Palantir, a little bit worrying, just in itself. Peter, co-founded by Peter Thiel, shady organization, a private company that works closely with the government and with intelligence agencies, basically to do pre-crime like stuff. building out networks of people, creating tools for intelligence officials to quickly sort through and search through a lot of data about you and me, frankly, about just American citizens, in order to figure out who's likely to commit crimes, and in the process, again, do the whole Philip K. Dick pre-crime thing to some extent, where they try to figure out in advance who is most likely to commit crimes, worrying if ever there was one. So she was a consultant with them, and I'm just trying to see if we have him back on. Bruno, do we have you with us?
Yeah. It sounds like you guys are talking about her connection with Palantir and the role that Palantir has served before on predictive policing, right? Is that what you guys were just talking about?
That's exactly what I picked up. I was just going over some of her other connections, some of her other relationship with the national intelligence establishment. Yeah, go back into it, please, Bruno.
Yeah. So this is from LeeRockwell.com. Individual interviewed Whitney Webb. She knows way more about this topic. So Palantir, for people who don't know, is a company is a company that was given the contract to come up with the vaccine allocation strategy and determine the critical population each vaccine should be distributed to. Palantir was founded by Peter Thiel and was initially funded by QTL, the CIA's venture capital arm, and the CIA client for the first 3 years of its existence. At present, Palantir is a contractor for 17 U.S. intelligence agencies and also the U.S. military. The company is also in charge of COVID-19 data under the auspices of the HHS. And when she worked at Palantir, she was the consultant. So
happen.
Yeah.
Oh man,
so,
this is brutal. Yeah. No, we keep Bruno. I'm sorry, man. We've got to pick you back up some other day and try to figure out what was causing this problem.
Yeah, because that's a tough one. It keeps blinking up.
Yeah, fascinating conversation.
Extremely interesting.
100%. Yeah, we wish we could continue the conversation. And maybe we can try him on some other means, and we'll see if we can get him back on. But anybody in the audience knows exactly what we're talking about. Keep dropping him out. And actually, I want to get back. I believe he's talking, when he says QTL, he's talking about InQtel, the American not-for-profit venture capital firm based in Arlington, Virginia, invests in high-tech companies to keep the CIA, I'm quoting just from Wikipedia here, and other intelligence agencies equipped with the latest in information technology in support of U.S. intelligence capability. Again, like he's saying, they're effectively the CIA, along with other intel agencies, venture capital firm. I've dealt with them in the past. I think just in the past, doing research on Palantir, doing research on Palantir's connections, and he's absolutely right that yes, they're farmed out to invest in private companies. They decided to go in with Palantir CEO Alex Karp, co-founded by Peter Thiel back in, I believe it was 2003. Thiel, Karp, and a handful of others. And yeah, we've reported on them in the past, actually. Anyway, Bruno, let's try this one last time. Bruno, are you there with us now?
Yeah, I'm on my phone this time rather than on my laptop. So
okay, let's get back into it. Yeah, different audio, but I think this will be a little bit more secure. What were you saying there?
Were you guys? Did you guys mention how she was a consultant for diversity? Did you guys catch that part when I was here?
I briefly brought that up. Yes.
Yeah. So she probably had a say in which populations are going to receive the vaccine first. And we know that they're pushing, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have talked about this, and there's also historical Black colleges and universities that have programs on testing the vaccine on their students. They want to test. They want people, poor Black and brown people, to receive the vaccine first because they say that these are the most sensitive populations.
And let's go back. We've got about a minute before we need to go into a break. But real quick, Bruno, why do you say that she would be in charge of choosing which members of the population get the vaccine?
She was the consultant for diversity for Palantir. So she is the one. She is the her role is to ensure that the company and the culture and the practices are fair and inclusive. So she has a say on which populations have to be are most sensitive for being being infected with COVID, which ones we have to treat first, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think you're in part saying that because the claim here is that Palantir work was farmed out to them. They were put partially in charge of operations with administering operational warp speed. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's it.
All right, let's try this. We're going to go into a break. We will be back on the other side of this break, continuing to talk with Bruno Franco. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We will be back in just a minute.
Fault Lines. Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamal Thomas. I'm joined by my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live from our station in Washington, D.C. Joining us with a far better connection is Bruno Franco, independent political analyst, commentator, and host of Frank Analysis and HMOI Hear Me Out podcast. Bruno, again, man, welcome to the show, man. Let's get into a fight that has been taking place. And I have to be honest, I think it's gotten to be an embarrassing spectacle at this point. What started off as a great idea, meaning this notion of primarying Pelosi, not primary Pelosi, but you know what I mean, basically putting Pelosi, if Pelosi wants to be Speaker of the House, then Pelosi, who's a capitalist, and understand that when you want something, it costs. Well, it cost a Medicare for All vote. It cost something else. There should be real material costs for Pelosi to get that vote, especially now. AOC lost her seats, so she didn't even get the committee seats. The Democratic Party, DCCC, DSCC, have taken steps to basically prevent people like her from getting in Congress. When we talk about the Civil War and the Democratic Party, that's just one element of it, where they basically was like, any group that works with a lefty to take out an incumbent will be blacklisted. This didn't happen, however, to Kennedy when he was going against Markey. So that gets across this notion of a certain level of hypocrisy. It wasn't that the Democratic Party was being nice to lefties just because lefties were being subservient to the Democratic Party. And a policy, honestly, that should have been taken with Joe Biden. Basically, if Joe Biden wants that vote, we're in the middle of a pandemic, Joe Biden needs to support Medicare for all. At the very least, Medicare for all with COVID. But no, lefties didn't push him on that. And now it's on Pelosi. Why do you think this has become a spectacle? I mean, because, look, the original idea was good, but eventually it became really divisive. I mean, the attacks back and forth where both sides are just scarring and just scraping at each other. And it's like you're watching on Twitter and one side says, well, this guy said that. And the other side said, well, you said that. And at that point, the entire point of it, which was a really good idea originally, gets lost. What happened?
It became a spectacle, Jamal, because of the person who's proposing the idea, and that's Jimmy Dore. And people hate Jimmy Dore. They hate Jimmy Dore because of his quote-unquote controversial take, even though it's just him raising his voice. It's him proposing what you call politics 101 strategies of withholding your vote until they propose something that you want. That's all he's doing. But because he has been going against the narratives that TYT has been pushing out, like Russiagate, the OPCW reports in Syria, they've been jealous of him for proposing this plan. And so it's become an attack on the character. And just like look at the tweets that people like Emma Vigilant and Anna Kasparian have been putting out there. It has barely to do with Medicare for all, and it has more to do with attacking Jimmy Dore's character and protecting politicians like AOC. Like, isn't it ridiculous?
Well, yes, but kind of. I mean, it depends on how you look at that, right? I mean, Dore coming out saying AOC was standing between you and your healthcare is dishonest. By the same token, him hitting her saying, look, you guys need to stand up for something is correct. And so I don't think I'm not seeing this from this point of view of everybody's just attacking Dore. I agree with you from the standpoint of the Cedars of the world, the Tim, what's his name? The other one, the other disgusting person. I can't think of his name right now. But like they attack him relentlessly. And so I think part of it does have to do with the messenger. So I think that's fair. If this message came from somebody else, do you think they would have this much resistance against it?
Yeah. I was just about to say, if the message came from somebody else, they would have been praising it. If it was AOC who came up with this plan, they would have been praising it and said that it's the best idea in the world. But because it's Jimmy Dore, that's why they turn it into this controversial issue when it shouldn't be. Like, we're in a pandemic right now. People are suffering. People have lost their health insurance. People are dying. Like, people have gone months without a stimulus. And like, we need Medicare for all now more than ever. Like, we're done waiting for them to come up with a plan or solution. Like, the plan, like, we need it now. And the best way to do it is to use your leverage, which is your vote, if you're a congressperson, and withhold your vote from voting for Nancy Pelosi until she agrees to put Medicare for all up for a vote.
Politics 101.
Okay, so we can go back and forth on this. In some sense, I definitely agree. But why do you think they're focusing on? Obviously, he's the one who brought it up. But why do you think there's this negative backlog of animosity towards Jimmy Dore? What positions has he taken in terms of the sort of high school cliquishness that goes on in politics? What has he done wrong in the past that would cause them to single him out, other than proposing this, which again, maybe they just don't want him to get the credit for it. But yeah, what do you see there, Bruno?
Well, they consider it, so they, as in like Sam Cedar, TYT, they think it, that it hurts the movement to attack the Democratic Party, which Jimmy Dore does a lot. And I think sometimes he does do it too much to the point where it distracts on focusing on other issues like foreign policy or going deep into civil liberties. But I mean, it's still necessary. Jimmy Dore points out things that are not obvious on the left, which is that the Democrats are not your friend. They're owned by the same people who own the Republicans. And so there are the people that are pretending to be your friends. And so that needs to be called out. And Jimmy Dore does that. And that angers people like Cedar, who wanted Hillary Clinton to be president, who wanted Joe Biden to be president. Because he sees it as like harm reduction. Jimmy Dore sees harm reduction by pointing out things that aren't obvious to the left, and that's that the Democrats, just as much as the Republicans, are not your friend.
It seems, just to interject briefly, it seems like this is another instance of like incrementalism versus revolution tearing the left apart in some sense, where it's not about our society at large. This time it's about the left as a movement, or the Democratic Party, or whatever, the vehicle for pushing left-wing politics, where it seems like the Sam Cedars are wanting something a little bit more incremental. And then the revolutionary folks and I'm using sort of a small R revolutionary, they're saying that is useless and that you're effectively just giving concessions to the corporate systems, the system as it is. And then the reformists are calling the revolutionaries crazy. They're blaming them for attacking their own, and they're saying that it's basically a useless strategy, that you're not going to be able to actually get progress that way when you're continuing to try to undercut your own move. I'm probably off base. You're probably you guys are both going to agree with me.
No, you're right. I mean,
what do you
you're
think?
Close. I mean, look, both sides have been attacking each other. Let's be honest. And you can hit AOC. I hit AOC in my own videos, right? Especially with this notion of, oh, I want a committee seat. And you didn't get the committee seat. These guys can't stand you. AOC was talking about leaving politics. It was that bad. I don't know if you've seen that interview where she was like, hey, we're not the enemy, etc. which gets across the level of vitriol that she was taking from Democrats. And so it's like at some point she needs to get, and I got to be honest, the lefties need to get that they're not your friends. They're not your buddies. They're not working in your interests, which is why I think for whatever Dore's faults, he does hit upon something that's right, which is a certain degree of emotional anger with the way the system is. And I think the anger is legitimate. But like you said, Shane, from the Cedars of the world, their thought is harm reduction. So it's, yeah, you got to vote for Biden. You got to vote for Clinton. It doesn't matter that it perpetuates the system the way it is. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that the system is gamed. Doesn't matter that they cheated. Saying none of that stuff matters. It's just one concentration camp less. And that's the way they look at the politics. Am I wrong, Bruno? I mean, this is basically this kind of divide, right?
Yeah, but what they don't realize, and you've done a great job of pointing this out on your show for many years, Jamal, is that each election year, we get more concentration camps. So it's like, first it's like 19 versus 21. Then the next election, it's like 25 versus 30. Then the election after that, it's like 70 versus 100. And so it's like, you know, the thing to do is to just withhold your vote. Like that's your leverage. Like we're not going to put up with more concentration camps because keep adding more concentration camps every election. So I mean,
and what's even weirder about
when
it,
you say concentration camp, what do you mean?
Well,
I'm just real quick,
Sam
Bruno,
Cedar one time made this allegory to one concentration camp less. Somebody called in and was like, hey, if somebody voted for one concentration camp less, you'd be okay for it. And Cedar was like, yes. The point that they were getting at is if you're putting in a Biden or you're putting in a Clinton, basically you're talking about maintaining a system with the way that particular system is, that is only incrementally different. And every 4 years, it gets worse. They move further and further to the right. So Obama, who calls himself a Republican in the 90s, gets cast as hope and change in 2008. And, you know, look at Biden right now. You have Joe Biden, who's basically going to be president of the United States. He is out of sync with pretty much everything from the standpoint of the country. And yet, there he is nonetheless. The party moves further and further to the right. That's the point. And, by the way, each generation thinks it's normal. So it's like each successive generation gets accustomed to wherever they are, and they get soaked in it. You know what I mean? It's like the people think that this is the normal way of politics. And unfortunately, I think we lose in this. Bruno, from your standpoint, how do we get, and maybe that's the wrong question. I was going to ask you for the most part, how is it that we can have these conversations and these arguments without them turning into spectacles? Because I got to be honest, what started off as a good idea it's like the idea in and of itself became the argument. Does that make sense? It's like the personalities involved became the fight. Like right now, Cenk Uygur is trending on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, right?
Yeah.
How do we have these fights on the left without these things turning into spectacles like this?
Just be as objective as you can. Like try to take your feelings out of it as much as you can. Just be like, look, they're calling out Jimmy Dore for getting a $2 million house. Just tell them the house that he got is his family's home. Like it's on Steph Zamorano's side. And you're going to be talking about that when Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian are more wealthy than Jimmy Dore, and TYT takes money from Katzenberg, and Sam Cedar has an MSNBC contract, so he is not going to say anything that goes against, that's going to harm that contract. Like why? And weren't you just defending Bernie Sanders for getting a vacation home? Like just point out like what they're missing here, like their hypocrisy. Like you can be objective about it by pointing it out rather than resulting in like insults or like these like you've seen them on Twitter, like people resulting to like insults and like pee poo poo jokes. Stay away.
Look, from my standpoint, it just seems like the attacks were coming from both sides, and that the levels of discussion for the most part just got really off the rails. And what started as a great idea, and I really wish everybody would have pushed that idea, ends up becoming a food fight on the left. Yeah, and that's unfortunate, man, because it really is a good idea. Bruno Franco is an independent political analyst, commentator, and host of Frank Analysis and HMOI Hear Me Out podcast. You can follow Franco on Twitter at B43Franco and on YouTube at Frank Analysis and HMOI Hear Me Out podcast. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We will be back in a moment.